We began Lent with Jesus entering the wilderness of temptation, a journey of spiritual focus, fasting, and strengthening of determination. The spiritual disciplines refined in the desert experience needed to be in place and solid for this day, Palm Sunday, the day when entry into Jerusalem would bring far greater temptations than any yet faced. The psalmist writes, "Give thanks, this is the day the Lord has made." On this day, Jesus of Nazareth could take Jerusalem. On this day, Jesus could take God's holy place, the temple, and reform Zion as a renewed and blessed nation. On this day, all the diverse groups of Jews could be challenged to unite and restore meaning to their identity as God's own holy and chosen people. On this day, Jesus could claim and wield his divine power, crushing his enemies and taking his seat on the throne. This is the day of public arrival. No more rumours, he is here. Of course, the problem with unity is that it requires all the fish used to swimming in little ponds to adjust their patterns to coexist in a larger lake. I may complain about my little pond, but at least I know how to survive in it. In the larger lake, I may need to make way for other fish. My patterns of behaviour may no longer work as well in the larger setting. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, people had to make their decisions. Could they sacrifice their current ways in order to follow Jesus? The cheering reception may have indicated that people wanted to repent and turn to God. But we are challenged by knowing the rest of the story. The cries of praise soon turned to cries of criticism. The hope and joy and fervour soon turned to debilitating fear. Disappointment led to scapegoating. Desperation led to the call for crucifixion. How easy it is to blame someone else for our own shameful situation. Is it fair? No. Is it right? No. Is it normal? Well, maybe. Just because it is normal behaviour to want to blame and criticise others does not make it right. When faced with a woman caught in adultery, Jesus does not condemn her. When rejected, accused, and sentenced, Jesus pleads not for himself, but for those who persecute him. When given a choice, Jesus chooses the poor. On this very day, Jesus knows he is riding into the stronghold of his enemies, but he does not run away. Instead, he enters into a week of confrontation so prophetic, so out there, that no one can stay sitting on the fence. He forces them to make a choice. Will they reject him, or will they follow him, even to the cross? The people of Jerusalem, the disciples, Herod, the priests, none of these can find it in themselves to follow the road Jesus must take to the end. Even the women who loved him have not the strength or power or capacity to accompany him. In their powerlessness, they become more horrified and traumatized as observers to the violence around them. How hard it is when we desire to see change but feel helpless to make a difference. Is it fair? No. Is it right? No. Is it normal? Well, yes. But just because it is normal to not do something because we feel helpless, it doesn't make it right. Jesus knew he was not helpless. Jesus knew he could call upon the armies of angels at his disposal. Nevertheless, Jesus embraced helplessness. He chooses not to incite violence. He chooses not to defend himself. He chooses a model of humility and non-violence that leads to his own martyrdom. I've never been a fan of martyrdom. To me, it seems like such a waste of good talent. Joan of Arc, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. Surely, if they'd stuck around, they could have accomplished so much more. If Jesus had just another couple of years teaching Peter, perhaps we could have got better instructions for the church. Martyrdom is so ugly, so lonely, so humiliating. Why is it that people with uncompromising ideals get martyred? Is it fair? No. Is it normal? No. Is it right? Perhaps. Perhaps we need to question for ourselves when humility and self-sacrifice are called for. Perhaps we need to stand on our faith, even when we are criticised and victimised, knowing that Jesus Christ has been there before us. His way, his truth, his life. They are not easy. Although it has only been for a few short weeks, I've started meeting some of you, and I've been learning stories reflecting great integrity of faith and love of Christ. Some of the stories are from some years ago, but I wonder about how people have fared over the last 2 years. Sometimes you've said, there's not been the right opportunity. Sometimes you haven't known how, and sometimes it has just felt too uncomfortable to share with others how the last couple of years have been. As a community, we need to develop the opportunities and the skills to be able to uphold one another in faith, not just in relation to our heritage, our history, but also in how we process and grow from this last period of anxiety and crisis. Upholding one another is what we promise to do for children at their baptisms, and those who have been baptised more recently, like those in the Chinese service. We promise to uphold one another. But we cannot expect anyone else to take baptism seriously if we do not act on the responsibilities of our own baptisms. As the baptised people of God, we are called to uphold one another in love. And how do we do this if we do not have conversations about our common faith and how we are managing in strange times? Last week, we began a fresh conversation as some people shared about the stories of faith with one another. It's what people do in the Bible study groups. But we need not be limited to those. I'm keen to ask you to have a conversation this Holy Week about faith. You might share simple stories of struggles and encouragements with one another. And as we talk, I believe the spirit of generosity and love will build in our sharing. We can share encouragement in our faith. We can experience the blessing of God. We can participate in blessing others. So, I'm not going to ask you to share intimate things here, but I do ask you to think about this question. When was the last time anyone asked you about how you are going spiritually? Or about how your prayer life is? Or how you're finding your walk with God? Has anyone ever asked you how you're going as a Christian?